What's up guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. In this video, I'm going to be showing you the making of an electronic song on the Roland Verselab MV-1. This song will go somewhat in a progressive house direction, but hopefully should be applicable to a wide variety of electronic music genres. I'm going to show you the process for getting a full song out of this thing. So without any further ado, let's jump into the device. I'm going to start this off by playing an unmixed version of the main section. So let's dive into all the individual elements, starting off with the kick. This is one of the built-in sounds. In fact, all of the sounds are built-in sounds into the device, presets and samples and such. I haven't loaded anything on here yet, so this is all stock sounds. I should mention that this track has the ability to be pitched around, so that's why this goes like this for the most part. So that little jump happens at the end of 4 bars. So this can be pitched anywhere. This is the only thing going on this track is just this kick, so that I can have as much control as possible over it in post. To get to this, go to preset, and there's a category called drums. It's like near the end here. So if I go into drums, there are a ton of one-shots all living in here. So I just picked a nice punchy kick and rolled with it. I should also mention that if I go to mixer, I've used the EQ a bit to bring out some low end and cut some mids. That makes it cut through the mix a whole lot better, makes it sound a lot more modern in terms of like a modern progressive house track. So that's fairly simple. Let me jump into the main element that inspired this entire song idea. This is really leaning into the Roland sound. Lovely patch. And the idea came from playing around with the chord engines. Let me get to that shift style. Gets to the chord engine right here. It's interesting how they've laid this out. You've got 2 rows of like a minor scale, chords in a minor scale, and then chords in a major scale. So verses. And so I had some fun with that in terms of kind of breaking out of the minor scale. So it goes like this. So there's that little twist at the end of that chord loop, which I think adds kind of a neat flavor to this whole chord progression. And then you'll notice how differently this patch responds when it's held down versus played kind of staccato. It becomes more of a pluck. So I really leaned into that, and that's where the main song idea came from. Pretty straightforward. Let's jump into the rest of the drums. This is a hi-hat track. This is another one of those cases where there's a one-shot loaded into this, and I'm playing multiple pitches to give a more interesting part. So you do that octave up. And you'll notice these pink notes here versus these red notes. That's indicating a lower velocity for these notes. The way to get to that, hit edit, then select a step. And so let me show velocity here. This is at 80, and then this is at 90, 100. So it's doing this kind of sine wave motion, and it cycles through those velocities. Plus there's the octave jump. Got some nice kind of alive hi-hats. This is using the kit engine. So I've only swapped out the sounds that I absolutely needed to change. So I've got 2 layers for the clap. And then this kind of real hi-hat. Super simple. That's it for the drums. So then bring in the chords. Bring in the bass. Let's go to the bass track. Another Juno type bass I love the Juno sounds in this thing. Let me go down a couple octaves. So this basically just follows the chord progression. It's fairly straightforward as far as bass lines go, and then I've inserted those little octave jumps. So I just did a pass with like the normal bass part, just doing its thing, following the chord progression to the letter, and then I did a second pass where I inserted those little octave jumps. Spices it up a little bit, and then in post I will sidechain this to the kick, probably pretty heavily. Although I should note that one nice thing about the kick living in basically a tone track is that it's tuned to be within the key of the song. So that definitely helps fight some phase cancellation because the low frequencies are hitting at very similar spots. And notice how I've set this up, thinking ahead in terms of the arrangement, how the fast hi-hats kind of raise the energy level by a notch. This is going to become important a little bit later. Let's talk about the ARP. Here's a bit where I didn't think ahead so well. I made a bit of a tactical error. The thing to know about the drum tracks versus the melodic tracks is that any of these, other than the vocal, can become any kind of track. They can be kit tracks, tone tracks. I believe only these can be looper tracks, although I'm not 100% sure. The main difference in how these behave is what style does. They can even take chords, like in here. Like that's obviously not a snare, but if I hit shift chord, that still works for chords. But if I just hit style, it insists on doing like a note repeat. Whereas in here in melodic tracks, that does activate the ARP, and it can't do note repeats. This is something I really hope that Roland updates, because sometimes you want to have more melodic tracks than percussive tracks. Sometimes having the note repeat on a melodic thing can be really cool. Like you get have some glitchy effects. There's definitely value in having a note repeat for a tone track, but I don't like being locked into it. So rather than use the arpeggiator, I just came up with an ARP part myself. So that goes something like... That's kind of a result of the way the pads are laid out. Like I've got this set to a minor key. By default, it's set to be chromatic, but this is some sort of minor key. Then it's just a matter of playing around until I found something cool. And the grid layout definitely encourages certain kinds of playing. I believe I recorded this in at a slower tempo and then sped it back up just to be able to nail it. And then I've got one step with a slightly lower velocity, so it has this kind of rolling through the notes effect. And that just does its thing, kind of works over any chord. So it's just this one bar little loop. And in post, I'm going to do some automation over the course of the song with like a high cut filter to, once again, evolve the energy level. So this is what we've got so far. This is definitely like a main section of a song, so the only thing we need left is a melody to really stick in your head. That's where this guy comes in. So let me mute everything else. Couple things I want to point out with this. Once again, built-in preset, really nice lead sound. But you'll notice the longer I hold it down, the more vibrato kicks in. That's not an accident. That's something I had to actually go in and make happen. So if I go to edit, select the clip, I can navigate my way to tone setting. And that's got all these controls for sound design, essentially. This is the exact same tone edit thing that you'll see on the MC-101. And of course, the MC-707 gives you a much more in-depth ability to edit tones. But within this, you've got things like release. I've modified that a little bit. You've got cutoff, which I raised a bit, all that kind of stuff. And you've got vibrato settings. So I've upped the vibrato rate. I have upped the vibrato depth, so you actually hear that pitch warble. And then I've upped the vibrato delay. So the vibrato doesn't kick in right away. It starts off straight ahead, and then as the sound goes on, the vibrato slowly comes in. And that creates a really nice effect, in my opinion. This is one of my favorite synth tricks, especially with MC-101 stuff, where if you have a short note, you don't even hear the vibrato, but if you hold a note down long enough, the vibrato kicks in. Super nice effect. Really adds a lot of life to an otherwise fairly simple melody. You hear the little bit of glide going on in here as well. So once I bring all that together, that's quite a full arrangement. And that's good because I have maxed out all of my tracks other than the vocal track, which I'm not using for this song. I do want to talk briefly about song structure because that's something unique to this, something like the MC-101 doesn't have, which is a song mode. That's all of this mess over here. It's actually not nearly as complicated as you might think. So let me go to section. Section select is selected. I came up with this full loop first, locked in how I liked it to sound, and knew I had enough to be able to arrange with. From there, I copied it across a ton of these section select pads and then started removing stuff. These are in somewhat chronological order in terms of how I intended to build up the song. So this super simple drums only intro, slightly higher energy drums intro, bring in the bass, bring in the ARP, and once again, I tend to filter in the ARP. It's not going to come in all at once. Breakdown introducing the chord part, and notice like I've already introduced the bass, so it can stay here. Bring in some drums, add a bit of a rhythmic foundation. So now we're introducing the melody for the first time. Bring the art back in. And now we're in our first kind of drop section where we've gotten rid of the melody, brought in almost all the drums. Now we've got the full drums with those fast hi-hats, once again bringing the energy level up a notch. So it's finally time to bring back that main lead line. Let that go on a few times, really drive home that melody, and then we can start breaking back down. At that point, I probably ditch the melody, let this ride for a little bit, and then end on like a drums and bass, and then drum only outro. Structuring this much like something that actually would get dropped in a club. From there, I recorded this into my computer via USB so I could get the individual tracks, and spent some time in Reaper mixing it, and you can hear the full song right now. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see my first day with this device, kind of discovering it from the ground up, you can click or tap up over here. And if you'd like to see a video of me making music with this thing's kind of younger sibling, the Roland MC-101, you can click or tap down over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.